before the betrayal. I used to believe my marriage was invisible to the world. Not in a sad way. In a safe way. No scandals. No drama. No whispers. Just two people moving quietly through life together, paying bills, sharing meals, building something slow and honest. My name is Ilara Vance, and for 9 years, I was married to a man named Rowan Vance. Rowan had a voice people trusted. Deep, calm, measured. When he spoke, people leaned in. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Confidence lived in his tone. That voice was the reason he was invited onto panels, podcasts, conferences. The reason strangers listened. The reason I fell in love. When we met, Rowan was nobody special. No followers. No influence. No recognition. Just ambition and ideas scribbled into notebooks at 2 a.m. I believed in those ideas before anyone else did. I proofread his scripts, helped him rehearse, encouraged him when rejection emails piled up. I sat on the bathroom floor with him when his first big pitch fell apart. When success finally came, it felt like our victory. I didn't realize success was also the beginning of my erasure. The podcast that changed everything. The podcast offer arrived quietly. Rowan came home one evening with excitement vibrating in his body. He kissed my cheek and said, "Something big might be happening." It was a relationship podcast. Modern love, emotional honesty, communication between partners. Everything Rowan claimed to value. The show wanted him as a recurring voice. I was proud. When the producers decided to add a permanent co-host, Rowan mentioned her name casually. Lena Cross. "She's insightful," he said. "Very articulate. Brings a female perspective." "Is she single?" I asked without thinking. He smiled. "No. She talks about her partner all the time." That answer settled something inside me, or so I thought. The slow disappearance. Change never announces itself. It slips in quietly, like dust gathering on furniture you stop noticing. Rowan started staying late. Recording sessions ran longer. Brainstorming meetings appeared on weekends. His phone was always face down. He still came home, but he wasn't present. Conversations became transactional. "How was your day?" "Fine." "Dinner?" "Already ate." Touch became rare. Eye contact shorter. When I brought it up, he said, "You know how demanding this industry is." So I adjusted. I gave space. I waited. I trusted. I didn't know trust was becoming my biggest mistake. Lena's name entered our home like an echo. Lena suggested this topic. Lena thinks audiences respond better to vulnerability. Lena believes people outgrow relationships. That last one stayed with me. One night I asked, "Do you talk about us on the podcast?" Rowan hesitated. "I try to keep my marriage private." I nodded, but inside something cracked. Because I wasn't private. I was absent. The night I saw the message, I was folding laundry. Rowan was in the shower. His phone buzzed on the counter. "Lena, I still feel the energy from today." I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. I didn't open it. I didn't confront him. Because opening it meant acknowledging the possibility that the life I was protecting was already gone. 2 weeks later, Rowan mentioned a live podcast recording. "Studio audience," he said. "Sponsors will be there." "That's exciting," I replied. "Can I come?" He paused. Just long enough. Then smiled. "Of course." That pause followed me for days. The studio was bright, modern, loud. People laughed. Cameras moved. Energy pulsed. Then I saw them. Rowan and Lena sat close. Too close. Their knees angled toward each other. Their voices softer when speaking privately. Her hand rested on his forearm as if it belonged there. He looked at her with familiarity, with comfort, with intimacy, and suddenly, everything I had ignored lined up into clarity. The recording began. Lena smiled into the microphone. Tonight, we're talking about honesty in relationships, especially when feelings change. Rowan nodded. She turned to him. You once said staying in a relationship out of fear can be more harmful than leaving. Yes, he said. Sometimes you meet someone who challenges you to be more authentic. Their hands touched. They didn't pull away. Something inside me went silent. Then something else stood up. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I walked forward and spoke. Is this the honesty you talk about? The room froze. Rowan's face drained of color. Or is this the part where you pretend your wife doesn't exist? The audience shifted. Cameras kept rolling. Rowan whispered my name. I looked at Lena. You build a platform on truth while holding my husband's hand? She opened her mouth, closed it. Rowan tried to reach me. I stepped back. You didn't humiliate me, I said. You revealed yourself. And I walked out. Rowan didn't come home. I packed quietly. 9 years fit into 2 suitcases and 1 broken heart. I didn't cry loudly. I cried carefully. The internet exploded. Clips circulated. Opinions formed. Headlines screamed. Rowan issued a statement. So did Lena. I stayed silent. Silence became my shield. I didn't destroy anything. I reviewed documents, contracts, morality clauses. I let truth handle the consequences. Sponsors pulled out. The podcast paused. Rowan's voice disappeared. Therapy broke me open. I learned I had confused loyalty with self-erasure. I learned betrayal begins long before touch. I learned silence can be strength. I started writing, then posting, then speaking. Women listened. Men listened. Truth spread. Months later, Rowan sat across from me. I ruined everything, he said. Yes, I replied. I want another chance. I smiled softly. I already gave you 9 years. And I walked away. Today I tell stories, not to destroy, but to awaken. I didn't lose my husband. I found myself. And that was the revenge he never expected. Sometimes the loudest revenge isn't revenge at all. It's becoming someone who no longer needs closure. When silence becomes loud. The first week after I left felt unreal. Time slowed, then fractured. I stayed with my sister for a few days, then moved into a small furnished apartment I found online. White walls. Neutral furniture. No memories. At night, I stared at the ceiling, replaying the studio lights, the microphones, the way Rowan's face changed when he saw me. Not guilt. Fear. Fear of being exposed. That realization hurt more than the betrayal itself. Rowan sent messages. Please talk to me. It wasn't what it looked like. We need to clear this up. I didn't reply. Because every word he typed was too late. By the second week, the story had mutated. Clips were edited. Opinions sharpened. Strangers debated my pain like entertainment. Some people called me brave. Others called me dramatic. A few said I should have handled it privately. They didn't understand something important. I didn't make it public. He did. The podcast was public. The hand-holding was public. The dishonesty was public. I simply refused to disappear quietly. Lena released a statement. It was carefully written, polished, detached. She said she never intended to hurt anyone. She said emotions were misinterpreted. She said she respected marriage. I read it once, then closed the page, because nowhere in her words did she say my name. I was collateral damage in her narrative, and that told me everything I needed to know. Rowan finally came to the apartment. I hadn't told him the address. That meant he had asked someone. That meant he was still crossing boundaries. He looked thinner, unshaven, desperate. I made a mistake, he said the moment I opened the door. No, I replied calmly. You made a series of choices. He stepped closer. It wasn't physical. I met his eyes. Yet, silence stretched between us. I felt invisible, he continued. The podcast made me feel seen. I laughed quietly. So you made me invisible instead? He had no answer. I want to fix this, Rowan said. I shook my head. You want relief from consequences. He flinched. I took a breath. You don't get forgiveness on demand. You don't get closure just because you regret being caught. That was the moment something shifted. I wasn't begging. I wasn't explaining. I was deciding. Rowan underestimated me. For years, I had managed logistics, emails, scheduling, paperwork, not because he asked, but because I cared. That included finances. I knew about the morality clauses in his contracts, the quiet paragraphs sponsors never joked about. They weren't punishments. They were protections. I didn't weaponize them. I simply answered questions when they came, truthfully, calmly, without embellishment. The fallout wasn't explosive. It was surgical. Sponsors withdrew. Episodes were paused. Invitations stopped coming. Rowan's voice, the thing he loved most, went quiet. He called me again, angry this time. You knew this would happen, he accused. No, I replied. I knew actions have consequences. You ruined my career. I didn't raise my voice. You built it on dishonesty. I just stopped holding it up. Silence. Then a truth he didn't mean to say. I never thought you'd leave. That sentence freed me. The podcast officially shut down 3 months later. Lena disappeared from public platforms. Rowan's social media went quiet. People moved on. But I didn't rush healing. Because rushing was how I lost myself the first time. Therapy forced me to face uncomfortable realities. I had ignored my instincts. I had confused patience with self-sacrifice. I had made myself smaller to keep peace. Betrayal wasn't the first wound. It was the final one. I began writing again. Not for an audience. For survival. Words poured out. Messy, honest, raw. I posted anonymously at first. Then openly. People responded. Not because my story was dramatic, but because it was familiar. Messages arrived daily. Women who stayed too long. Men who admitted emotional infidelity. People who recognized themselves in silence. I wasn't alone anymore. Pain became connection. Connection became purpose. Almost a year later, Rowan asked to meet. I've changed, he said over coffee. I lost everything. I listened. Then I said gently, loss isn't transformation. He reached for my hand. I moved it away. I forgive you, I said. But I don't return. That broke him more than anger ever could. Here is what revenge stories rarely say. The real victory isn't watching them fall. It's realizing you don't need to watch at all. Rowan didn't lose me because of Lena. He lost me because he chose validation over integrity. Today, my life is quieter, stronger. I speak when it matters. I leave when it doesn't. I don't fear being alone anymore, because loneliness inside a lie is worse than solitude in truth. I didn't destroy my husband. I stopped protecting his lies. And when the truth stood alone, it spoke louder than revenge ever could. People think life restarts after betrayal. It doesn't. There's no reset button, no clean slate, no dramatic transformation overnight. Life continues, quietly, unevenly, sometimes cruelly. The first year after Rowan faded out of my life, I lived carefully. I made small decisions slowly. I learned to trust my instincts again, one choice at a time. I changed apartments. I changed routines. I changed how I spoke to myself. But the scars didn't disappear. They softened. Rowan's name stopped appearing in headlines. Then it stopped appearing in conversations. Then it became something people hesitated to bring up, like an old scandal everyone pretended not to remember. But ghosts don't need headlines. They linger in quiet moments. At grocery stores. At red lights. At random songs on the radio. Healing wasn't forgetting. Healing was remembering without bleeding. 2 years after the podcast collapsed, someone asked me casually at a dinner party, "Didn't your ex used to do something online?" I smiled. "Yes," I said. "He used to talk about honesty." They laughed politely and changed the subject. That was it. No drama. No sympathy. No explanation. That's how power fades, not in explosions, but in irrelevance. I didn't search for her, but the internet remembers. Lena resurfaced quietly under a new brand. Different focus. Different tone. No mention of relationships. She avoided anything that required moral authority. Because once credibility cracks, it never fully heals. I felt no satisfaction, only distance. My writing evolved. What started as survival became structure. I was invited to speak, not about betrayal, but boundaries. Not about revenge, but self-trust. I refused labels. I wasn't a victim. I was a witness. And witnesses tell the truth without screaming. 3 years after the studio incident, a letter arrived. Handwritten. From Rowan. I didn't open it immediately. I let it sit on the table for 2 days. When I finally read it, it wasn't dramatic. No begging. No blaming. No excuses. Just a confession. He wrote about losing relevance. About watching others rise while he stayed stuck in the shadow of his own choices. About realizing he had confused admiration with love. The last line read, "I didn't lose you when you walked out of the studio. I lost you long before, when I stopped protecting what mattered." I folded the letter and let it go. Forgiveness is misunderstood. It doesn't mean reopening doors. It doesn't mean restoring trust. It means releasing the need to punish. I forgave Rowan quietly. Not for him. For me. And forgiveness didn't bring him closer. It freed me further. I didn't rush into another relationship. I didn't fill silence with noise. When I finally did love again, it was different. Slower. Softer. Mutual. No performance. No audience. No validation required. I learned that real intimacy doesn't need microphones. Years later, I was invited onto a panel. Not a podcast. A discussion. The topic? Authenticity in the age of performance. As I sat backstage, adjusting the microphone, I smiled at the irony. I didn't build my voice on charisma. I built it on survival, and that made it unbreakable. I saw Rowan once more, across a street, at a crosswalk. By accident, he noticed me first. He smiled. I nodded. The light changed. We walked in opposite directions. No words, no tension, just closure without conversation. Rowan didn't collapse because I exposed him. He collapsed because he built himself on performance instead of integrity. I didn't rise because I fought. I rose because I stopped shrinking. I walked into a podcast studio expecting to support my husband. I walked out knowing I had lost him. But what I didn't know then was that losing him would be how I finally found myself.